Alright, it's starting.
Hopefully we're live.
Yep, we are.
So this is new. I was going to do this through my computer, but there apparently is not a way to do this via computer because I have my video camera and my nice microphone all set up. So, but instead I had to do this through my phone, so that's a little bit of last minute scramble. So welcome. Hi, I'm Heron from Church of the Sacred Circle. Hopefully you can hear me all right. There's a little bit of wind going on outside. And I'm here for our first virtual circle. So, hi. Say hi if you're here. I'm going to do a short introduction. And so what I'm doing here is not going to be a traditional Wiccan ritual. Instead, we're going to do a little bit of a celebration of Vesak or Vesak, and that is a celebration of the Buddha's birthday. And I will get to that in just a second. I also wanted to note that this April 1st, so just a couple days ago, was the 13th anniversary of this structure right here, the Church of the Sacred Circle, in our temple space here in West Valley. It was built on April 1st, 2007. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. And so we've been here for 13 years here in this space doing circle, and we've had a lot go on. We've had birthdays, and we've had parties, and we've had weddings, and we've had baby blessings, and we've had memorials, and we've had countless rituals and sabbats and meditations and all kinds of great stuff. So I'm happy to have us be in our 14th year now, and we're still going strong. So now we're moving into a new world of online circle. So hopefully this works, and please give me your feedback. If you can hear me, if you can't hear me, that would be great. Kai, why don't you look at the comments on your phone and let me know if anybody's saying anything. Okay, so Vesak. So the Buddha's birthday is traditionally celebrated in one of the spring months. And when I say traditionally, it varies so widely throughout Asia and the traditionally Buddhist countries that it could be almost any time during that month. So for instance, in most of Asia, it's observed on the full moon date of the fourth month in the Chinese lunar calendar, which typically is May. But in other parts of the world, this day could fall earlier or later. So Theravada Buddhists, which are typically people in Indonesia and Thailand, combine the observance of his birth, enlightenment, and death into one holiday called Vesak or Vishaka Puja. Tibetan Buddhists also combine the observance of these three events into one holiday, Saga Dawa Duchen, and that usually falls in June. So in Mahayana Buddhism, they separate the observances of the birth, of the death, and enlightenment into three separate holidays held at different times of the year. So Mahayana countries tend to be more northerly countries, such as South Korea and Japan. Such as in Korea, it's actually a week-long observance that begins a week ahead of the Vesak date, so whatever their full moon is. And in Japan, which adopted the Gregorian calendar, it always falls on April 8th, regardless of what the moon is doing. So April 8th is actually coming up later this week. It's coming up on Wednesday. So we're kind of going along with the Japan date because it's very close to our, falls on our full moon this year. And so yeah, we're going to share a little bit of the Buddhist traditions with you. I'm a longtime Buddhist. I've studied Buddhism for many, many years. starting before I even really found paganism. I always kind of consider myself Buddhist. In fact, one of my very first deity forms that I ever had in my whole life was a very small statuette of Kuan Yin. So I've always been very drawn to Buddhism. I studied Tibetan Buddhism for a number of years. Like actually studied with a group, with the Lama, got a Buddhist name, you know, did a pilgrimage to India, all that kind of good stuff. So it's always been a very strong part of my own personal spiritual path. I like Buddhism because it can be celebrated in many different ways. In Tibetan Buddhism and in, for instance, Japan, Buddhism is very syncretic. It's very integrated with the original celebrations of the pre-Buddhist populations. For instance, Shinto populations in Japan, or in Tibet it was the pre-Buddhist shamanistic traditions. So I find it very interesting how instead of displacing these religions, it just sort of merged with them and became very syncretic with them. But for me, Buddhism is really about the meditation. So meditation is a super powerful tool to help us with anything that's going on in our lives. People who meditate tend to have a lot easier time with struggles. And then of course the Eightfold Path, with its emphasis on detachment, is also a very strong thing that we can use. So in whatever the date that it's celebrated, it's a time for hanging lanterns, enjoying communal meals, parades, musicians, dancers, floats, dragons, common. In Japan, the Buddha's birthday is called Hana Matsuri, or the Flower Festival. So you see we have some flowers on our altar today, and there are offerings of fresh flowers and food. So one really interesting tradition that I find is kind of part of this syncretic tradition is the washing the baby Buddha. So a big part of the Buddha's birthday, of course, you've got a baby. So Buddha's a baby. What do you do with him? So one ritual is that you have a small statue of the baby Buddha and you wash him. You wash him with fresh water or with tea, special teas that are made. And according to the legend, the Buddha was actually born in a flowering orchard. So that's part of the reason for this sort of springtime ritual, because he was born in a flowering orchard. So all of the trees would have been popping with bright flowers and beautiful smells. And so that's part of the reason that it's a flower festival. So when you wash the baby Buddha, you get this small, usually standing figurine of the Buddha. The right hand is pointing up, the left hand is pointing down, and it's placed on some kind of elevated stand. Unfortunately, with the whole virus thing, I didn't actually have the ability to go out and get a baby Buddha statue, so we're just going to have to acknowledge this tradition and not actually practice it. But one of the things I found interesting about this tradition is that when you pour water over the baby Buddha to wash the baby, so when he was born, the reason that he has one hand up and one hand down is that the legend says that he stood straight up as a newborn, took 7 steps and declared, "I alone am the world honored one." And then he pointed up with one hand, down with the other, to indicate he would unite heaven and earth. So those of you who are part of magical traditions, and particularly if you studied the tarot, what's one of the first cards of the tarot? It's the magician. What is the magician doing? He's got one hand up here and he's got one hand pointed down, because he, as the musician, is uniting heaven and earth together. And then the 7 steps that he took are thought to represent the 7 directions. So north, south, east, west, up, down, and center, or where you're standing. And they interpret the words, "I am the world honored one," to mean I represent all sentient beings throughout space and time, or everyone. So as the representative of all sentient beings, that's one of the impetus for the Buddha to attain enlightenment and to kind of show other people the way of enlightenment. You can read a lot more about Buddhism. There's a lot to it. We're going to touch on a couple of things in this meditation. So first we're going to do something that almost all Buddhists do, which is called refuge and raising the bodhicitta. So refuge means that when you approach ritual in the Buddhist tradition, you take refuge. So taking refuge is considered to be the first step in any Buddhist traditional ritual. And the refuge is it's probably best explained by an acknowledgement that you alone are not, that you're not alone. So taking refuge, it literally says, I take refuge in the Buddha, so the person who showed you the way. I take refuge in the Dharma, so the Dharma is a term for his teachings, right? So you're taking refuge in his teachings. And then I take refuge in the Sangha. And the Sangha is a term that is the community of practitioners around you. So it's an acknowledgement that when you step on this path of Buddhism, you're not alone. You have the Buddha to show you the way, you have his teachings to guide you, and then you have the community of people around you. So I thought that was really poignant, and then particularly in this time when we're all kind of isolated, to remember that we're not really alone, although I will be touching on that a lot in this. And then raising the bodhicitta is an interesting thing from the Mahayana or Vajrayana tradition, which I am part of. And by raising the bodhicitta, what we do is we say that when we seek enlightenment, we do not do it just for our own sake, but we do it for the sake of all sentient beings. So by participating in this path, we help to raise or elevate all sentient beings into enlightenment. So I'm just going to do the refuge and raising bodhicitta prayer. Normally when you do this, you prostrate in front of the altar, but I'm going to do those separately so you can kind of see how they're performed. When we do the refuge prayer, we put our hands into what's called the lotus bud position. So when we put our hands together, it's not flat like a Christian prayer. It's creating a bud with our hands. And this is the acknowledgement of the potential that lies within us, okay? So I want you to go ahead and do your hands like this, put them in front of your heart center, and then just listen as I say the refuge prayer. Okay? Sangye Shodam Chake Choknam La Chanchu Bardu Dakni Kapsu Chi Daki Jinsok Yepe Sonam Ki Droth and Shir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Shodam Chake Choknam La Chanchu Bardu Dakni Kapsu Chi Daki Jinsok Yepe Sonam Ki Droth and Shir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Shodam Shoke Shoknam Ma Janchu Bardu Dakni Kapsu Chi Daki Jinsok Yepe Sonam Ki Jolaf and Shir Sangye Drupar Sho. And then just sit there for a moment and visualize this lotus bud in your heart center. Taking a deep breath. And then releasing. Now, if you want to do the refuge, the bowing to the altar, there's a specific way to do it. When you do this, and this is acknowledgement again of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, you do your bud here. You do the first one up at the top of your head. You do the second one at your third eye. You do the third one at your heart, and then you bow to the altar. Then you stand up again. So crown, then down. And then you push your forehead onto the floor or the rug. And then again, crown, heart, third eye, heart, and then down. So, normally you would do those together. So if you wanted to do those with me, I'll give you just a moment so that you, since you're facing the altar, you can go ahead and do that. There are pilgrims across Asia who, when they go on their various pilgrimages to the holy places of Buddhism, they do that the whole way. They bow all the way across, miles and miles and miles. So they'll take a little pad with them, and they'll face wherever they're going to. They will bow, and then prostrate, that's what it's called. They will push their pillow out to where they touched. They'll walk up to it and do it again, so all the way. So it's really, it's a touching ritual for sure. Okay, so by raising bodhicitta, we dedicate what's called the merit of our prayers to the benefit of all beings, past, present, and future. And that's one of the things that we said in this refuge in raising bodhicitta prayer. Okay, I'm going to start with a heart lotus meditation. So that returns to this bud of the lotus that we have in our heart. There is a very well-known Buddhist mantra, and it's Om Mani Padme Hum. And this is hail to the jewel in the lotus. That's a very rough translation, but it is meant to acknowledge the potential for enlightenment within all of our hearts. So we're going to say this a little bit. I'm going to guide you in a heart meditation, really quick heart lotus meditation. So I want you to, instead of just putting your hands here, I want you to sit quietly, put your hands down, and then just listen to what to the guided meditation. So if you close your eyes, imagine this flower bud inside your heart. It's closed up, it's green on the outside, and it's not blossoming yet. And we're going to imagine this now in our heart centers. So just imagine this green bud in your heart center with long leaves wrapped around the outside. Imagine this green bud floating here in the center of your being, in your heart. And now see it begin to glow with a bright green and vibrant light. Taking some deep breaths, feel this green glow begin to flow around the blossom clockwise. After a few moments, you can feel and see that this heart, this lotus, is beginning to stir and move. The flowers begin to rustle and unfold just a little. And the green energy grows brighter and brighter. And now as the green bud begins to unfold, you see a delicate pink light emerging from between the leaves. And as it opens, you see this pink light begin to resolve into petals. These delicate pinkish purple petals also begin to open and unfold. And soon the green leaves are obscured by the pink. And there are many petals, and they unfold and unfold and unfold. And as you breathe in and out, and this unfolding happens, and then in the middle of the unfolding of the pink and purple leaves, you begin to see a bright yellow golden light. And this golden light is so bright that you can barely look at it or feel it. And within this golden light is a gem, a jewel of enlightenment. And you acknowledge that this light represents your own potential for growth, for enlightenment. Breathing in deeply, breathing out. And now you say the name of the mantra that acknowledges this. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Drawing out the syllables like a song. Om Mani Padme Hum. And the vibration synchronizes with the vibrations of the petals and the light and the flower. Om Mani Padme Om. And then one more time, as this light permeates your body and surrounds you. Om Mani Padme Om. And breathing deeply, you allow this visualization of the lotus to dissolve into the light. And this light dissolve back into the universe that it came from. And breathing deeply, you return your awareness to this time and place where you sit. And we let go of this meditation and of this visualization. And we move on to the topic of letting go. Letting go is hard. Letting go is a principle tenet of Buddhism. It's the very fundamental understanding of Buddhism, that life is suffering, that suffering causes pain with us, and that this pain is because we are is due to attachment. And a lot of people misunderstand attachment because they go, well, I have to have stuff, I have to have my things, I have to have food, and this is kind of the Western mind colliding with these ideas, because what attachment really means is that you acknowledge that you need these things, or that you have these things, or you have this need for these things, but then you say, that's okay, I'm just going to let it go. And that's a lot harder than it seems. So we ask ourselves, how does our mind feel when we're not grasping at anything, when we're not trying to entertain ourselves, when our mind is not going outside or going anywhere at all, and when there's no place left to go? So we think of all of these things around us and how much pain it causes us when they leave. So the cycle of life is that of endless change. And it's the one truth of life. Everything changes, always. People die, things get broken, things leave, move away, things get destroyed, people, friendships go away. Change is constant. And it's when we are attached to these things and allow this change to hurt us is when we suffer. And so really the idea behind Buddhism is that it's not that you don't enjoy the things in your life, or that you don't enjoy the love of your family or your friends. And indeed, that acknowledgement that we need other people is right there in the refuge, right? We take refuge in the Sangha, in the community. So it's not that we have to be a completely Zen person and live in a bare white room with a single bulb. But it's the fact that when we have things in our life, we acknowledge that this will change, that the suffering will come. And suffering is even okay. I mean, it happens. We're human. It's okay to suffer, but we put ourselves through a lot needlessly because we hold on to things that we can't change. And so the letting go part is the key. The understanding that things change, everything changes. And instead of keeping all of the emotions and all of the things that we have inside us, we practice letting go. And that is really the heart of Buddhism, and that's really the path to enlightenment. How do you release these things? And having attachment isn't just things. We can be attached to emotion. Some people are really, really attached to the idea of suffering itself. You know, if there's somebody in your life who's always miserable, who's always, having a hard time, that person is possibly attached to the whole concept of suffering for themselves. So we need to kind of rise above this and let it go, because that's the only way we can attain enlightenment or even come close. And so I wanted to address all of this that's going on. So our lives have drastically changed over the last few weeks. Almost everyone has had some kind of effect. And a lot of people are suffering because of this. You can't see your friends, you can't see your family, you can't go to your work, you can't go to school, you can't go to concerts, you can't go to movies. I mean, there's so much that is just gone in our lives. And from a Buddhist perspective, we kind of all been forced into retreat. So there's this thing that happens with Buddhist meditators, and that is that you deliberately put yourselves into a situation similar to what we've been doing, where you only have access to yourself and food, for instance, and that's what you do with your life, is that you sit and you contemplate and you meditate and you walk and you feed yourself and learn how to be with yourself in this type of situation. And we do this on purpose. So in a sense, we've kind of all been forced into a sense of retreat, where we have been forced to come and contemplate our lives without these external entertainments or these external forces that have been pushed on us in our lives. Some of us still have to work, some of us don't, and we've lost our lives, and there's a lot of uncertainty. That also causes suffering. And I don't have a good answer for that, but meditation is very, very helpful in these kinds of situations. And the way to meditate is that practice of letting go. So I'm going to introduce you to something called a one-pointed meditation. And this is what, when you go into a Buddhist retreat, this is basically what you do. You let go, and you practice letting go with your mind, and you allow yourself to just sit. And it can be really, really hard at first, but it can be very beneficial. Meditation has actually been studied as a beneficial practice for people who are suffering from various mental illnesses. And now I'm not saying that you should stop your medication. No, that is not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that meditation has been proven to help lower your blood pressure and to help people cope with the things in their lives that they don't have control over, because it's a practice of letting go. So a one-pointed meditation goes like this. You pick a point about maybe 6 feet out from you, and you just look at this point. And while you're looking at this point, you try to not think of anything. Now that's really hard. I know, I get it. The Buddhists call this the monkey mind, right? Our little mind goes, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And the idea is to kind of put a blank canvas in your mind, say a whiteboard, right? So just look into this distance, not too far away. And there's a big misconception that you do this with your eyes closed, and you don't want to do that because you could fall asleep, or your mind starts wandering. So this is actually a very focused level of awareness, right? So it's not blocking anything out. It's becoming aware of your own brain and its tendency to try to distract you. So you pick this point about six feet out, and you just sit. You don't have to sit in a lotus position. You don't have to put your hands in any particular way, although there's very traditional ways of doing that. In a lot of Buddhist meditation, you'll see people sitting on a round cushion, and then they have a cushion to put their knees on, and then they have their hands, like this. This is called the lotus position. But you don't have to do that. You can just put your hands like this. You can just set them down. And when you're doing the one-pointed meditation and you've got your little whiteboard going on in your brain, what you do is you focus on the sensation of your breath coming in and out of your nose, right? So you just breathe in and breathe out. And you just sit there and you focus on the breath coming in and the breath leaving. Now, inevitably, you're going to have a thought come up. So the trick is to just say, okay, I see you, and then allow it to fall away. Again, a lot easier said than done. But with practice, that's kind of the point of meditation, is you practice, right? So you sit down for 5 minutes, and you breathe, and you just look, and you tell things to just, okay, I acknowledge you, okay? And then you return your awareness to that whiteboard, and just the awareness of breath. So we're going to try it for just a few minutes. I'm going to set my little timer for 3 minutes. So this is your challenge. Can you do this for 3 whole minutes? It's a lot harder than some people imagine or realize. So I'm going to ring the bell at the beginning and end the end. So just get comfortable. Get comfortable. Put your back straight. Put your head straight, just pointing forward. Focus your attention on your breath, and imagine that your mind is just a whiteboard with nothing written on it yet. Okay, here we go. to maybe treat some of this extra time that you might be having during the lockdown to do that for maybe 3 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day, or challenge yourself to maybe do 3 minutes a day for a week and then go a little bit longer and a little bit longer and see how it feels. And really the concept is just breathe and allow your thoughts to drop away. And it's not that you're supposed to have a blank mind the whole time, but when thoughts arise or when images arise, we just say, yes, I see you, you acknowledge them, and then dismiss them and say, okay, you can go. And that is really the secret to meditation. It's a lot harder than it seems, but it is very beneficial, or it can be very beneficial. Okay, so we're going to wrap up with something that is pretty central to a lot of Buddhism, and it's called the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is one of my favorites, and it really kind of addresses this whole topic of impermanence, of things changing, of things going away. So first I'm going to have this lovely man sing the Heart Sutra to you, if I have signal and I can play my YouTube. And hopefully you can hear it. I will also post the link to this in the group so that you can do it later, because he does a much better rendition of it than I do. And then I'm going to read you what the Heart Sutra says in English. So it's really only 25 verses, so it's not terribly long. But the video is about 4 or 5 minutes. And it's called the Prajnaparamita, or the Heart Sutra. And I encourage you, while this is going on, you don't have to do the one-pointed meditation, but just sit, listen, and try to absorb the sounds. Can you guys hear that? Okay, so this version of the Heart Sutra is by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is pretty well known. And he translated the Heart Sutra. And so I'm going to read it to you again if you just want to listen. You can do it with your lotus in front of your heart, or you can simply put your hands down and just listen to the words. And the thing about the Heart Sutra is it talks a lot about how things that don't exist. But a really important point to the Heart Sutra is that if we just think that so I'll just read this to you because he puts it really well. So if you just think about things not existing, as the Heart Sutra is talking about, it's talking about how there is an inherent emptiness in all things. And it's interesting because, of course, modern quantum mechanics basically says that all atoms are mostly empty space. So there is kind of a physical kernel of truth to this emptiness that the Heart Sutra mentions. But it would be really easy to take that emptiness and turn it into a sort of nihilism, where if everything is empty, nothing has meaning. And if we're supposed to let go of things, then that means they shouldn't have meaning either. And that's actually not what we're trying to get at. So really the Heart Sutra, and the reason that it's called the Heart Sutra is because without developing a soft heart and compassion, which like water softens our mental rigidity, there is a danger that the teachings on emptiness can make our hearts even harder. If we think we understand emptiness, but our compassion does not increase or even lessens, then we're on the wrong track. Therefore, for those of us who are Buddhists, it is good and necessary to give rise to compassion and bodhicitta before we study, before we recite and contemplate this sutra, and all others may connect with any spot of compassion that they can find in their hearts. So really, the Heart Sutra is about the fact that despite the emptiness, despite the inherent letting go-ness of Buddhism, we come from a place of compassion because we acknowledge the suffering in ourselves and others, even as we seek to lessen this suffering. And that's really kind of the point of the bodhicitta, right? So we do this to help all others. And that's really interesting to have watched over the last few weeks as things have gotten really desperate or dire. A lot of apocalyptic fiction tends to depict the apocalypse as, very small bands of humans fighting with other small bands of humans for resources. And in our current society, what we've seen is that these difficult times have actually brought out the best in so many people. So yeah, there's people who are selfish, there are people who are hoarding, but more people are opening their hearts than are hoarding. So there's people that are out there making sure that the elderly in their community or the needy in their community are being taken care of, that they're actively seeking out opportunities to help others. And this is really the meaning of the Heart Sutra, because emptiness is just an inherent acknowledgement of things, but it's not how we live in the world. And compassion is how we live. So when I read you the Heart Sutra, I want you to imagine your heart expanding like the lotus and not just saying, oh, everything's empty and that everything's meaningless. So this is actually called, in Thich Nhat Hanh's version, the insight that brings us to the other shore. And Avalokitesvara is the bodhisattva of compassion. Very interesting. Avalokitesvara, while practicing deeply with the insight that brings us to the other shore, suddenly discovered that all of the 5 skandhas, or worlds, are equally empty. And with this realization, he overcame all ill being. Listen, Shariputra. So he's talking to Shariputra, who was a student of the Buddha. The body itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is this body. This body is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than this body. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all phenomena bear the mark of emptiness. Their true nature is the nature of no birth, no death, no being, no non-being, no defilement, no purity, no increasing, no decreasing. That is why in emptiness, body, feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness are not separate self-entities. The 18 realms of phenomena, which are the 6 sense organs, the 6 sense objects, the 6 consciousnesses, are also not separate self-entities. Ill-being, the causes of ill-being, the end of ill-being, the path, insight, and attainment are also not separate self-entities. Whoever can see this no longer needs anything to attain. Bodhisattvas who practice the insight that brings us to the other shore see no more obstacles in their mind, and because there are no more obstacles in their mind, they can overcome all fear, destroy all wrong perceptions, and realize perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future, by practicing the insight that brings us to the other shore, are all capable of attaining authentic and perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Shariputra, it should be known that the insight that brings us to the other shore is a great mantra, the most illuminating mantra, the highest mantra, beyond compare, the true wisdom that has the power to put an end to all kind of suffering, and therefore let us proclaim the mantra to praise the insight that brings us to the other shore. So I'm going to share with you this mantra. I want you to help to repeat it with me. So we're going to repeat it 3 times. And it goes like this. It goes gate, gate, para sam gate, bodhi swaha. And what that kind of means in a literal version is gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond the Buddha or the Bodhi. And then swaha is a way of saying, so mote it be. So, gate, parasam gate, bodhi swaha. Gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhi swaha. Gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhi swaha. We just sit for a moment, do a little bit of breathing. I hope this helped you. I hope our first online meditation was great. I wanted to say a little bit about our altar. So this is a traditional puja offering of the Buddhists. There are 8 offerings that are correlated with the 8 auspicious. There are 8 auspicious offerings in the sense that Buddhism has 8 auspicious symbols, or it also represents the Eightfold Path. So there's water for drinking, water for bathing, there's flower for beauty, there is incense for purity of smell, there's light, there is perfume, there's food, and there's music. So the little shell on the end represents the shell trumpets of Buddhist, one of the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism. Anyway, so they are the traditional offerings. If you wanted to look up the puja, and you can go ahead and make an altar of your own and celebrate the birthday of the Buddha this week. Again, that's coming up on the 8th on Wednesday if you want to do the Japanese flower festival. So definitely include flowers on your altar if you choose to do this. So I'm going to have my assistant turn off our live video. Please let us know what you think.
Before it ends, what happens if they don't have the right materials for the ritual or just for the altar? Like, what substitutes could they use?
You just meditate.
Alright.
Yeah, you don't have to use anything. You can just meditate and imagine that you have an altar with all of the things that you need.
Yeah.
Buddhism is more about what's happening up here than what's happening here. So these are, in Buddhism, these are meant to be tools that we help ourselves, help us focus on certain things. So again, thank you for attending, and we will put links to some of this information out in the event. So